The scripture this morning is Luke chapter 1, verses 57 through 66. Now the time came for Elizabeth to give birth, and she bore a son. Her neighbors and relatives heard that the Lord had shown his great mercy to her, and they rejoiced with her. On the 8th day, they came to circumcise the child, and they were going to name him Zechariah after his father. But his mother said, "No, he is to be called John." They said to her, "None of your relatives has this name." Then they began motioning to his father to find out what name he wanted to give him. He asked for a writing tablet and wrote, "His name is John." And all of them were amazed. Immediately his mouth was opened and his tongue freed, and he began to speak, praising God. Fear came over all their neighbors, and all these things were talked about throughout the entire hill country of Judea. All who heard them pondered them and said, "What then will this child become?" For, indeed, the hand of the Lord was with him. Thanks be to God.
I'm no longer expecting Jesus. pretty hard to go back to the hymnal after that. Thank you, choir, Carl and Jen. Diane, thank you so much. For the past several weeks, we've been tracking the elderly Elizabeth and Zechariah in the first chapter of the Gospel of Luke, finding plenty of amazing things in the process. A woman who becomes pregnant long past her childbearing Best Buy date. Her husband who is visited by an angel and subsequently struck speechless, literally, for having expressed a bit of reasonable skepticism that such an event could actually occur. The tender meeting of Elizabeth and her equally miraculously with child cousin Mary, where the baby in the older woman's womb actually leaps in the encounter. And now in our reading this morning, even more wonders abound when Elizabeth delivers her son, a reminder, if she needs one, that she herself has been delivered by God from the cultural shame of her barrenness. And finally, when both Zechariah and Elizabeth affirm that their son will not be given a family name as was the custom, but will instead be called John, the name given by the angel, Luke tells us that fear, meaning awe came over all of their neighbors, and all these things were talked about throughout the entire hill country of Judea. Quite the juicy buzz. So much amazement in these stories leading up to the birth of Jesus. In a tiny spot on the planet, God is stirring things up, opening wombs to wondrous pregnancies, sending angels, striking mute, filling the neighbors with awe and wonder. And Luke does not hesitate to trace a line from such events directly to the hand of the Lord. But that is true when we think of it throughout the entirety of the biblical witness, is it not? Whether it is the parting of the sea, water from a rock in the wilderness, wine from water at a wedding, wherever the miraculous, the wondrous, the amazing occurs, we can sniff out God. A couple of months ago, I started a new spiritual practice. Every morning, first thing, after making sure the coffee maker is on, I step outside our kitchen door and I look up. Rain cancels, because I do not confuse spiritual practices with body-hating exercises. And if it's too chilly, I'm out there for just a wee bit of time. But this time of year, I especially love the early morning darkness. There's not much to see on overcast days, but when the clouds give way, I greet the stars, the planets, the airplanes, the satellites, and the moon, seen or unseen. Good morning, all you beauties. Now, this past Thursday, I caught a quick glimpse of a meteor arcing across the sky. It wasn't a giant big arc, just a little arc, but there it was. And it was accompanied by the faint hooting of an owl in the oak trees. Shooting stars and hooting owls, wow. a fine way to begin my Thursday. The eminent Jewish theologian and Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel once addressed God, "I prayed for wonders instead of happiness, and you gave them to me." Well, that got me thinking, would I pray for wonders instead of happiness? Pray, in other words, to focus my life on wonder rather than on a search for my own happiness? I thought long and hard, and my heart says yes. Yes, if pressed to that choice, I would choose the wonder. But then I wondered, why? Why would Heschel, why would I, why would any of us make that kind of choice? What is it about awe and wonder and amazement that captures us so, and that makes them so worth the seeking? Well, that's a big, giant question with a multi-layered answer. But for today, I want to focus on this. For Heschel, awe was an intuition, as he put it, a realization that things not only are what they are, but also stand, however remotely, for something supreme. Awe, he wrote, enables us to sense in small things the beginning of infinite significance, to sense the ultimate in the common and the simple, to feel in the rush of the passing the stillness of the eternal. For Heschel, everything not only points to that divine reality we call God, but actually participates in it. And this is true for not only the big splashy wonders like impossible pregnancies and the Milky Way over Devil's Tower, but the little things as well. The things that you and I encounter every single day, the things we can so easily not notice. Like Luke, the gospel writer, Heschel makes a clear connection between our experience of the wondrous and the presence of the holy. I invite you now to listen while I read a poem some of you may have already countered in our lovely Advent devotional booklet. It's written by Reverend Sarah R.A. Speed and is entitled "The Last Time I Saw God." The last time I saw God face to face, I was looking at a bed of tulips. God was every color of red. I was merely a mortal in awe of it all. The time before that, we were tying back the curtains, looking for stars. God was the deepest purple and the brightest light. The time before that, the city was soft with snow. God was the quiet that tucked us all in. And in between these small gifts, there were newborn babies and sapling trees, homemade bread, the sound of a church singing on Sunday. Why, yes, we are lucky. We are more than lucky for the moments when delight and awe unzip the weight we carry around. If wonders, then, are not only about the big splashy stuff, but about the myriad little everyday things that surround us and fill our lives, how indeed do we open ourselves to be amazed by them rather than rush past them, ignoring them, or taking them for granted? How might we actually see God in them? And these are more than rhetorical questions. So let's begin by taking a moment for each of us to recall a time, just one time, when we experienced awe. And if something comes to mind and you want to just share it very briefly with a few words, speak up. I will repeat it for the folks on Zoom. But where have you experienced awe? Last night on a patio. Laura?
Yesterday, performing Handel's Messiah, and then Lucino, and the sing-along chorus, just filling the church with all.
Okay. Yesterday, performing Handel's Messiah, a sing-along Messiah with the sound filling the church. Yes.
A herd of elephants in South Africa.
A herd of elephants in South Africa. Chloe?
Returning from a cross-country trip and coming into the redwoods at the border of California.
Oh, coming into the redwoods at the border of California on the return trip home.
Driving down Petaluma Hill Road and looking into the hills and seeing the trees and green, and having that every day of our lives.
Looking at the trees and the greenery along Petaluma Hill Road and the wonder that that's there all the time for us to behold. Yes.
50 years of marriage celebration.
50 years of marriage. Yay. Awe and wonder. Yes.
Birth of my youngest daughter and home birth by candlelight in the dead of our bedroom.
A home birth by candlelight. The day that Alan met Karen.
The glorious colors of the leaves during the fall season.
The color of autumn leaves revealed in the fall.
The delicate moon crescent last night glowing in the sky as the sun was disappearing.
The waxing crescent moon glowing in the sky last evening as the sun was disappearing. Yes.
Never-ending cookies that Irene seems to make.
And Karen.
The summons to Irene to keep those cookies coming. The sound of a giggle from the pulpit.
The picture of the Milky Way you just showed us, that's where we live. That's our galaxy.
That is our galaxy, the Milky Way. Awe and wonder. That is our home. Well, we could go on and on. So thank you for that. And may that spark continued reflection on your part. So if we are surrounded by wonders in our daily lives, what gets in the way of our experience of them? In our Changemakers group, we call this the saboteurs. What obstacles do we face to actually experiencing awe and wonder? Here are a few things that I have thought of. Hurry is probably up there in capital letters and bold. When we're perpetually in a rush and in a hurry, how much are we missing? Stress can get in the way. Being on autopilot, otherwise known as sleepwalking through life, that will inhibit our noticing. Those habitual ingrained ways of thinking and perceiving close us off. It makes it very difficult for us to open to the new if all we are expecting is the same old, and that goes along with a lack of expectancy on our part. When we step out the front door, what are we expecting to experience? If we are too wrapped up in ourselves and our problems, that can certainly inhibit that. And just the unquestioned assumptions that as we move through life, today is going to be exactly as yesterday, and tomorrow will be exactly as today, and we have these blinders on us. Can you think of anything else? Skepticism. Anger can get in the way. A lack of honesty. Fear and vulnerability. Listening to the news. Feeling brokenhearted. Others, Sue?
I personally, the people's absorption and love for their cell phones. Cell phones and other bright, shiny objects. Yes. Isolation. Yes. Inattention. Yes. Lack of health. Hope. Lack of hope. And sometimes lack of health.
Believing I know better than everybody else.
Okay. The ego. The ego can get in the way. Retribution. Yes. Fear. Yes. To get more personal, what opens you? What have you found that helps open you to wonder? Or what do you think might help you? Any thoughts, any ideas?
There's a book called The Nature Fix, and it's about how nature, opening ourselves to nature, actually improves our health.
Okay, a book, The Nature Fix,
Nature Fix, yeah.
recommended to help us open.
Being able to listen.
Yes.
Being with my grandchildren.
Being with grandchildren. Children are so good at bringing us to that place of awe and wonder. Being with any children, yes.
Greta Thunberg said, do not look for hope, take action, and hope will come to you.
Taking action instead of waiting around to be inspired or hopeful. Glow.
Getting on my bike
Getting on
and
a
riding my bike.
bicycle, yes. Okay. Music, yes, indeed.
Connecting with others.
Connecting with others. Being around other people who are open, yes. Well, thank you for your responses. We know that wonders are not only around us out there, but they are within us as well. And some of you may have read the article this past week in the Press Democrat about Ada Limon, Sonoma native and our nation's 24th poet laureate. Limon's poem, In Praise of Mystery, a poem for Europa, will be engraved on NASA's Europa Clipper spacecraft, scheduled to launch next October with the expectation that it will enter Jupiter's orbit by 2030. Now, I read this story this past Thursday morning, the very same morning that was kicked off with a shooting star and a hooting owl. And so I sat back at the kitchen table and tried to just wrap my head around this, trying to imagine, I personalized it, what it would feel for me to write a poem that ends up being engraved onto a spacecraft somehow, a spacecraft that is set to travel 1.8 billion miles in order eventually to orbit the planet Jupiter. Wow. I thought for a minute that the toast was burning, but actually it was only my head on fire. So here's part of that space-bound poem. We are creatures of constant awe, curious at beauty, leaf and blossom, at grief and pleasure, sun and shadow. Then later on, she concludes the poem with this: we too are made of wonders, of great and ordinary loves, of small invisible worlds, of a need to call out through the dark. Those are some of the words that one day will orbit Jupiter. We are creatures of constant awe, and we too are made of wonders. If I know myself as made of wonders, I will respect and take care of myself. If I know you as made of wonders, I will respect you. I will bow to the God in you, and I will be concerned for your well-being. If I know the stranger out there as made of wonders, I will at the very least seek to do no harm, but to pray and to work for their wholeness. Heschel believed that awe enables us to perceive in the world intimations, hints, whiffs of the divine. Awe and wonder, in other words, lead us to the heart of God, because we begin to see that God is all over the place. In every shooting star, in every hooting owl, in Devil's Tower and Jupiter, in Abraham, Joshua, Heschel, and Ada Limon, and the stranger out there, in tulips and spindly saplings and homemade bread, in baby Jesus and baby John and all babies before and since, in precious me and in infinitely wondrous you. We all know we live in such crazy times, heavy with fear, with greed and with violence, still we are here and we exist. And to exist, to be a human on planet Earth right here, right now, there's only one word for it. Wow. Thanks be to God.